Okay. I have a question for you all. How many of you watched the debate on Thursday night? Okay, how many of you could not watch the debate on Thursday night? Wow, pretty split. And I bet that wasn't because you had a prior engagement, right? Me too. I couldn't do it. I couldn't watch the debate. As a matter of fact, these past 4 or 5 years, my inclination to watch what's going on politically has grown less and less and less. And I've been really worried about this because this is coming from a person who loves democracy. Loves. As a kid, I used to watch all the debates. In high school, I was on the debate team. I used to write a little political side in our community zine in high school. That just dated me, that word, right? And I also I used to go to the polls and help as a volunteer. I mean, I love democracy. When I went into Peace Corps, it did nothing but reinforce this already love for democracy and this way that we get to share our voice in the polls. But over the past 4 or 5 years, I've become less and less engaged, and it's been harder and harder for me to be engaged. And I've had a really hard time placing it about what is it that makes it hard to be engaged. And I think it's pretty clear. But I saw an interview with Tim Shriver that kind of clicked it all together for me, before the debate, actually. He says that we in America have an addiction to contempt. That we have an addiction to contempt, and we have this addiction, and we know we have it because contemptuous behavior wins political favor and money in our world. And that social media has become a space where that has monetized this contemptuous addiction. Every time we click on something that makes our heart go like this, someone out there is making money off of it. And it's done nothing but make us even more divided as a community, as a world, as a nation. Now, in the Gottman Institute is a marriage counseling institute, and they've been around for 50 years. The Gottman Institute used to talk about this, that there's a ratio of contempt to dignity in a marriage, always. And contempt being the ratio should always be 1 to 5. Now, I love this because it means that we're human, and there will be, at any given moment, we might have a smidgen of contemptuous behavior to our beloveds. But we have 5 of the other, which I think the best word for it is dignity or respect, right? And that in a marriage, a good balance is that 5 dignity and 1 contemptuous behavior. And that as you have disagreements, that arrow might go up or down. I'm not telling you anything you don't already know and live out in this world. But when a marriage switches those ratios, and that it is 5, the contemptuous is a 5, and the dignity is a 1, that's it. That's the end of the marriage. So there's a scale for that. Now, I want you to think about United States right now. Where are we on that scale? Any ideas, thoughts? Anyone brave enough to think about it? It's scary. I think in the contemptuous zone, we might be higher than we should be, right? That I think we can agree on. No matter what political party you are. And they were doing this research. It's a group called Unite. They're doing this research between extreme positions in the political parties to see if there's commonality in the fact that we all believe we're being contemptuous to each other, and there is. There is. And he created this Unite program. Now, does anyone know who Tim Shriver is? Does his name sound familiar? It might. I'll give you a little history there. He's the grandson of the youngest Kennedy, and his father created the Peace Corps, and his mother, or was a part of the Peace Corps creation, and his mother was the creation of the Special Olympics. And that he has been leading the Special Olympics up until 2 years ago. Now, I know that the Kennedys are a political family, and he knows that as well, but he's trying to create a space where we are debating better, that we're having better discussions, and more ideas rather than less. Because right now, what it seems like, we're so caught up into our corners that we're not even talking to each other. And so they came up with this scale. And thinking about how contemptuous behavior is destroying our democracy. Now, when I think of a scale and contemptuous behavior, my inclination, and maybe yours, was to immediately go to a person or a party or a group that was displaying contemptuous behavior. I want you to hold that thought. I went there immediately. I want you to hold it. Take note of it, because we're going to return to that in just a moment. Now, why are we talking about this today? Well, because it's the 4th of July this weekend, and Jesus has a ton to say about this. Today's gospel, actually Jesus throughout the Gospel of Mark, has been going through Mark, and he has been dealing with these death-dealing forces. That's when he sends out the demons. It's like dealing with a force that is creating death in the community, soul, heart, body, mind, all of it. And one of those death-dealing forces that Jesus is talking about are the things that separate us. So I believe Jesus might have a few things to say about our contemptuous behavior towards each other. In today's gospel, you have a twofer, 2 stories that are related, and they're meant to mirror each other. So I'd like to take a moment, and you're welcome to open up to the gospel, and think about all the reasons, all these things that are connected in the 2 stories. We've got 2 stories, one of a young girl and one of a woman. Well, how are they common? They're both women, yes. Anything else? Did you catch anything? What about opposites? Any opposites that you caught? One's young, at the very beginning of their life, and one is old, in the sense that this woman has been bleeding for 12 years. Could you imagine bleeding for 12 years? That life-giving force, that part that in her culture makes her a woman and has status to, is completely broken. Now, I'm not going to talk about if that's right or wrong, but that is where they are, right? What else did you notice? They both acted on faith, and they asked for Jesus' help. There was also this commonality of 12. Woman who had been bleeding for 12 years, and the girl who was 12 years old. You also have the opposite statuses, like we said. We talked one is young and one is old. The other one is the top of the social status. Her dad is the guy in charge. And the woman, like I mentioned earlier, has very little social standing now. She has no money now, too. And Jesus heals them both. Doesn't matter where they come from, who they are, what side of the totem pole they are, Jesus heals them. And the woman, he moves her from an unnamed woman, an unknown woman, to daughter. That's quite a change, right? Daughter. He restores both of these girls, these women, to wholeness. Because that's who Jesus is. Anything that divides us and makes us less than human or less than whole, Jesus wants us to heal. How we look each other sometimes can make each other less than whole. Jesus is reminding all of us that we are God's beloved. That's what I was telling the children today. We are God's beloved. Even they are God's beloved. And so Jesus has a lot to say about this scale or thoughts of contemptuousness. I want you to go back to your initial thought. Perhaps you're better than me. I'm gonna pray that you're better than me. Because the first thing I did was point outwards at somebody else and say, I really wish that they would behave better. But in truth, it starts with ourselves. Now, I have a scale for you. If you can, the ushers are going to pass out this scale. It's called the Dignity Index. And it goes from 1 to 8. 1 being the most contemptuous, 8 being the most dignity. And for us to put in a scale about how we think, act, or speak about others. Or to think about the debate about how our politicians are speaking, acting, or talking about others. Now, I'm going to give you a couple of the examples. I'll give you the extremes, and then I'll give you the 2 middle points. 8, each of us is born with an inherent worth so that we treat each other with dignity, no matter what. That's the highest dignified sense of the scale. 1, going back all the way to the bottom. They're not even human. It's our moral duty to destroy them before they destroy us. That's no good, right? Don't forget the choir in the back. And then I'm going to move to the middle. 5. On the other side has a right to hear and a right to be heard. It's their country, too. And then a 4. We're better than those people. They don't really belong. They're not one of us. In truth, I have fallen victim to being a 3 or a 4 or a 5. In truth, I have fallen victim to reading articles or watching programs that puts people in at that category of 3 or 4. Now, the Unite Institute says never stop believing what you believe. That doesn't mean that we all get along. What it means is that we hold each other to an account of looking at each other as human first and disagreeing with grace and dignity, creating bigger debate and better debate. We in the Bay Area have a lot of influence in the world because our tech companies are centered right here. Maybe even some of the institutions that you work with or know people who work with. We in the Bay Area need to hold our community better and making sure that we are holding each other with dignity and care. And as Jesus followers, I think that's part of our duty. So I think there's a couple of asks for me, for you all, for all of us to think about. The first is to use a mirror in this debate time, in this season where we start to go us versus them, to not take part of it. Second, don't consume anything that takes part of it. Don't be part of the economy of it. Stop clicking on it. Easier said than done, I know. If we were to stop doing that, what happens to the industry? It'll fall, right? It will change. May we hold each other accountable to truly love each other, even if we disagree with every bone in our body. May we be called to love as God loves us. Amen.